Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a REST service using C# in an ASP.NET application. We're also going to demonstrate a data transfer object, or sometimes known as a DTO. So here's a quick preview of what the app will do. You can see that I've got a service running and I have a method called getByUserName. Now this is a little bit hard to read, so I'm going to copy this and paste it into a page that will format the JSON data so it looks pretty, like this. So you can see what the results are going to be. So I am searching for everybody that has an A in my database. And so you can see Wilma and Barney, and let's see who else is there. It looks like Bam Bam as well. Now the DTO part of this REST service is going to package up a list of people plus a data code and an extra message. So this is ahead to see how you would design a REST service using C# and ASP.NET. Okay, so let's get started with the coding here. So I'm in Visual Studio 2019. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to search for WCF as my project type. I'm looking for WCF service application with C# as the language. Let's choose next. I'm going to name my project as User Service. So the project has been built, and as usual you can see that there are some classes that have already been given to us. So let's look at Service 1, and you can see that there are two methods. One's called getData, the other one is called getData using a contract. And so in the interface you can see that there is this getData, and there's another one that says getting using a contract. Let's just test this out. I'm going to delete the second item here and this second class that we don't need. We're just going to have the bare minimum for getData. So let's see if we can make this work. So I'm going to right-click on Service 1 and choose View in the browser and see if there's any results. So it looks like the service is up and running. Now I'm going to try to put in a URL, which is already defined for me, which is called getData, and then it's expecting a number. So you can see that I'm getting this 400 error. So that means my configuration is not done. My web service is programmed but not configured correctly. So let's go fix the configuration. So the configuration is found here in web.config. We have to add a few things into the XML file here. So the first part of the section that I have to put in here is called services. So we'll insert this in the line 11 or 12 here. Now, the service has several parts to it. First of all, there's this thing called behavior configuration, and we can invent a name for it called, I'll call it my user REST service. Then the second part is what is the name of the service, and so we're taking the file name from our project here. So over in the right column we have the project solution explorer. So I'm going to take in user service.service1. Then the next item is called endpoint, and so we're going to tell it that this is a web configuration of web. We're going to bind it to HTTP, and we're going to call the contract as the interface class here. So user service.iservice1. So now we have to identify this behavior that we have listed here as the behavior associated with my user REST service. So I'm going to just copy this line right here, and down in here where it says behavior, I'm going to insert the word name and then paste the actual name of the service. Now the other unresolved part is this service here called web. So now let's go to the behavior section, and just before the end of the section I'm going to insert something called endpoint behaviors. And let's go ahead and close that off. So now we have to name this thing as an endpoint behavior. So let's go to behavior, and we'll give this thing a name equals web. Okay, so we've got ourselves a behavior defined which matches the behavior configuration up here at the endpoint. Now the type of the behavior says we're going to use the HTTP protocol, so let's put that in here. So we've got ourselves three new sections. We got this endpoint behaviors. We've named the service behavior as the same string as we put up at the top, and then the service itself is identified as the user service and the contract that goes with it. So you probably have a legitimate question. How in the world are you supposed to know how to set all these configurations? Well, I certainly can't remember everything that I've just showed you here, so I have to look things up. So here is the official documentation for Microsoft, And it says how to configure services using the config files. And so if you go through here, it'll show you what all of these things mean and the description behind them and what you're supposed to put in every little category. So if you've got to go look this up or at least find an example that you can follow, then you'll be all set when you create your own. Now we also have to define some endpoints so that this service will work. So let's go into the iService area where we're going to define the endpoints. So the format for this request is that we're going to say we're going to use a GET statement, so web GET. The response format is going to be in JSON format. So to get to there, we type in web message format dot, and then we get JSON as a choice. And then we have to give it the URL or the URI. And so this is the format. We're going to have get data / a value. So we're expecting the string get data and then a number. So I have said this is an int. Let's change this into a string. And let's go fix the other side, which is also going to be a string. Okay, it says my service is up and running. Let's see if we can go to get data, and I'm going to put in a 2, and there I've got it. So I know that my service is up and running now. The point of this exercise is to add a little bit more complex type of a message that we can pass through as if we were working with a database. So the goal of this service is to show a list of users. So let's create a user class. So let's right-click on the project and choose Add a Class, and we'll call it User. So in this class, I'd like to demonstrate several different data types. So we'll give this person an ID, which is an int. We'll give them a string for a name. We'll give them a Boolean for a is preferred customer or not. We'll give them a float for an income level, so that is a decimal point. And then we'll also work with a list. So I'm going to create a list of high scores, let's call it. So a list of integers. So let's create a constructor so we can build some users. So I'll do a right click on the username, and then I'll choose do these quick services, and I'm going to add a constructor. So an important part of this service is to be able to serialize these objects so they can be printed in JSON format. So I have to add some extra special tags here. So data contract will allow this to be serialized. Then for each property in my class, I need to add data member of right above the name of the property. And so we'll copy and paste data member for each of them. Now here's the point of the lesson. We're going to create what's called a DTO, or a data transfer object. And so when we try to get a list of users, not only are we going to display the users, but we'll add some extra data, such as a code and a message. So let's see what we can do with a DTO. So a DTO is just a class. It's going to contain a bunch of data. So I'll do a right click, choose an add class, and I'm going to call mine user DTO. This object is going to be serialized again, so I want to make sure that I include a data contract as the item right before the class name. So the most important part of the data DTO is to have the list of users. That's the main data package that we're trying to send. So I'm going to add that as a property of my DTO. Now the other two parts of my package are going to be a message code. So I'm going to use this as just like an error number, or perhaps the number of items that are in the list. It doesn't really matter here. The point is a DTO can hold a variety of information. I'm going to also send a string, which is the message text. So in a real situation, you might have error codes, you might have message instructions, you might have a date, you might have all kinds of things that you can package in. So think of a DTO as the one suitcase that you're allowed to take on the trip when you're going to send a package of information to the users. All right, let's go back into the interface, and I'm going to add some new items that are going to be included in our service. So rather than retyping all this stuff, I'm going to copy and paste a few times. So I'm going to paste once, twice, and 3 times. So what's my first item that I'm going to program here? So let's try get all users. And that is going to just return everybody in a list. So let's put in get all users, and there needs to be no parameter for this one. So since this is an interface, I'm going to define the names of the functions that I plan to implement. So the first one is get all users. The second one is get users by name, and this is going to expect a string to be the name that is being searched for. And then the last one is get by ID, or get user by ID. and so this will just be an ID number. So each of these will have to be implemented in the other class. So let's switch over to service 1, and let's go ahead and tell the computer that it's okay to implement all of these items that were defined in my interface. Okay, so now here's the rest of the assignment here. We have to implement each one of these things. So that way we make sort of a database service going on here. Well, we could go into the database, we could create a table, we could define users, we could go through a lot of stuff. That would take a long time. So I'm going to do a shortcut here, and we're going to hard code some data. So to make this work, I'm going to create a constructor for this thing, and I'm going to define some users inside the constructor. So first of all, let's create a property called user list. It will be a list of type user. So let's go ahead and create a new user. So I'm going to call him U1, and let's use the Flintstones here for our example. So user ID 1, Fred is his name, his income will be about $92,000, and now I need a list of scores. So let's create a list. So rather than create the list right here in line, I'm going to create it ahead of time and then insert it here. So let's just delete that for a second and create a list of scores up here. So let's go ahead and define a list. So I'll create it and call it list of scores. It's of type integer. And then I'll just add 3 random numbers to it. I'll add 99, 92, and 83. As a matter of fact, I want this to be a function. So this is kind of a side step, but I'm going to show you how to extract some code if you want to make this into a function. So I'll right-click, choose Quick Actions, and choose Extract Method. So now this method is called New Method. How about, let's say, get some random scores is my method name. Well, they're not really random. They're going to be the same for every user. So let's truly make it random. So since I'm going to be using random numbers, at the top of the class, I'm going to introduce a new variable, and we'll call it random. So I want to use this same random number generator every time I work with a user, and so I'm going to pass it in as a parameter. So I'm going to generate a list of random length. Let's do up to 10 different scores, and then each of those scores is going to be a random number between 0 and 100. So now we have generated a list of scores as a separate function. So that's probably a little bit overkill for our process, but we are going to get random scores. So I'm going to take away that function name, and I'm just going to put in the item right there as get some random scores in line with the constructor. So let's copy and paste all these users and then give them some other values. So I'm going to go through users 1 through 6, give them a ID number from 1 to 6. Let's give some names to them. So I'm going to pick the Flintstones. Let's go with Fred, Wilma, Barney, Betty, Pebbles, and Bam Bam. Then I'll manually change a few of these from preferred customers to not preferred customers, give them a salary, and then we should have a list of users to work with. All right, so we've got the users defined. Now let's add them to the list. So we're going to need 6 lines to say add U1, U2, U3, U4, U5, and 6. All right, so let's get down to business now, what we came here for. So down in the methods for the first one called get all users, we can simply return the list of everybody we have in our list. So I'm going to return a value, and let's see if it is called user list. There it is. So what's our problem now? It says you've got an issue. You're trying to return a list of users, and it is expecting a string. Aha, so up here, my return type should be list of type user. And now that should work. Now we've got a problem at the top though. It says, hey, you've just changed the nature of this function here, or this method. So you either want to implement a new one or go back and change your interface. Let's go back and change the interface. What did we do here? So the string type is not the proper type here. Let's make this a list of type user. And now those two match. These two are also going to be incorrect, so let's change them now before I forget that we are going to be getting a list of type user for all of them. Okay, we'll probably have to fix these implementations now. Okay, so let's get down to the others. So we got get all users, get user by ID. This was going to be a list of type user. And then finally the user names, the same thing. Okay, so we got all that patched up. We should be able to test our app now. So get all users is supposedly ready to run. Let's check it out and see if it actually works. So let's go to Service 1, choose View in the Chrome browser. Okay, so now we've got our method going here. Let's try get all users, and we've got, it looks like, a list of people. Well, let's test this out to make sure this is actually working correctly. So I'm going to copy everybody. So right click, choose copy. I'm going to open up a new tab. So the website I'm looking for is jasonlint.com, which allows us to paste in our code here and validate it, and it gives us a more pretty formatted page here. You can see that we have a list of people. We have Fred, and we have Wilma, Barney, it looks like everybody's here, Betty, and Pebbles, better spell that with a B, I guess, and Bam Bam. Now, we've got ourselves the entire list of people. That's not quite what I wanted. I was supposed to use this DTO object, and I didn't get it. So where did I lose track of the main point of the lesson? Let's go fix that. So it is returning a list of people, but I want the DTO. And instead of returning get all users, I'm going to return my DTO object. So a user DTO. So you can see that a user DTO is just a big package that's kind of an envelope around this list. So we can include the message code. And when I get everybody, I'm just going to include a message code of 1. The message text, I can send in another message that said, everybody is here. And then the user list, of course, is still the same. It's the user list. Now at the end, when we do a return, we're going to have to change this to the user DTO. Okay, so now that looks like it will probably work. We have an error. We're going to look at the top here, and it's going to say, hey, once again, you're not following the pattern of your iService1. So let's go back and change the return type. So get all users is not a list. The data type that we're expecting is a user DTO, and that fixes the error. Okay, so since I messed up the others at the same time, I'm just going to overwrite them with user DTO. Let's go back and fix it again. I'm sorry, we're going to have to go back and fix the data types on all of these functions. So we've got ourselves get user by ID, we're expecting a DTO, and user by name. Okay, that should probably work now. Let's go and run it again, and let's see what it looks like. So get all users. Seems to me that we got everybody, but there's some extra information in here. So let's do a right click and copy it again, and let's put it into the JSLint page and see what it might look like in actual readable format. Okay, so now we have our message code is 1, our message text, and we have the user list. So it's just a bigger class that includes all of the rest of the data here. So that seems to be a little bit more like the goal that we were looking for. So let's implement the other functions here, and then we'll be done. So let's attack this last one here that says get user by name. So let's delete the code here and then see if we can make this work. So the first attempt that I'm going to create here is going to return everybody. So I'll make a new list called return these people, and it will be just assigned to everybody, which is the user list. So that's not really what I want. I want to be able to filter the list and to be able to find only the people that have this string. So I'm going to add a new function at the end here. So I'm going to put a dot after user list. And then I'm going to put in a where statement. So where is an interesting kind of an operator in C#. It allows me to put in what's called an anonymous function, which is a filter. So in JavaScript, they actually call the function filter. Let's see how this works. So I can come up with this function. It's going to be x equals x dot, and then I can say that for each item in the list represented by the letter x, I'm going to pull out one of the properties. So name is the property. All right, so after I type in the function name or the property name, I put a period, and I can do several things. I can say, does my name have to be exactly equal to the search? I could do that, but I'm also going to try to see if I can be more general. So I'll choose contains and then say contains the string that they gave me. Now, that should give me a filtered list. What do I've got here? It's a problem. What we need is a list here. So let's go to toString at the end, or toList, I'm sorry. And now we've got ourselves a filter. Now this will work as long as you type in the correct capital letter or lowercase letter. Well, I don't want that either, so I want to be able to compare both the lowercase and uppercase equally. So let's say 2 upper, or 2 lower, let's use that. You could use 2 upper, 2 lower, either one of them. And so that way it's no longer case sensitive. So let's go 2 lower on each of these. Okay, so now I've got the list. We need to generate the rest of this user DTO. So let's go to user DTO and let's add the list. The user list is going to be equal to this list I just created, which is return these people. The user DTO is also going to have a number. So let's go message code, and that's going to be equal to some significant number. Let's say that's the number of people that we found in the list. So let's type in return these people dot count, and that will tell me how many people have been found. So then lastly, for the message text, let's give an explanation. Let's say the people who have a name in their name. So this will give me some more information for the user. Lastly, we need to return it. So this is another example of the DTO. You can see that we're packaging up a list of people. We're sending a message code and a text. Let's see if it works. Okay, it looks like it's up and running, so let's put in a new endpoint. So this is going to be get users by name, and then I can put in a letter. So let's put the letter A. So it looks like it found somebody. So let's do a Control A, copy the guy, and go and put it into the JSLint page and see what it looks like. So I can read this. Okay, so we've got ourselves a page. It says message code 3. These people have an A in their name, and Wilma has an A. Barney has an A, and so does Bam Bam. So it found 3 people. I suppose we can try that with somebody else. Let's go and see if there's anyone with a B in their name. And it looks to me like we have the people with a B in their name, and there are 3 of those. Just another one. Let's try W. And sure enough, W in their name only gives us Wilma. So it looks like the filtering seems to be doing its job. Lastly, we're going to create find user by ID. No, I could just leave this as a challenge to you. So why don't you see if you can finish this off and then make a similar service that gives us a DTO that returns only one person that matches the ID number. So look at the pattern that we have here and create it on your own. Well, if you're still watching, that means you need some help. So this is a lot like the previous example. So I'm going to start by copying and pasting over top of this guy here. So instead of matching the user name, and we're going to match a different property. So x.id is what I'm looking for. And in this case, I'm going to have it equal to the letter or the words ID that came out. And then when we're done here, it says I'm going to say people who have ID as their ID number. Now, do you see a problem? It says up here, it says you're trying to use an integer and compare it to a string. So we have to parse this because it's coming in as a string, but the property ID is actually an integer. So let's put in int32.parse and then surround the ID with the parentheses. And let's see, this might work. So let's check this out. We should get people with an ID number now. So I'm going to right click on service, choose view in the browser, and see what comes out. Okay, so here's the service, it's up and running. Now we're going to try this get user by ID, and let's try 2. And let's see what comes out of this. It says, well, we've got a bunch of stuff. Let's copy it and let's put it into JSLint again and see if I can read it this time. So what does it say? There it is. Message code is 1. The people who have 2 as their ID number. Seems to work. Let's put in another number. Let's try ID number 5. And we're getting pebbles, and it looks like 5. So this seems to be working as planned. So the message that you're supposed to get from this project is that we are using a user DTO. It's the package. It says not only do we want to send a user list, but we want to add some other things, such as a message code and a message text. So in your real applications, you'll be sending error codes, you'll be sending counters, you'll be sending other details about the package in this message. So there you go. We've got ourselves a complete REST service using a user DTO. In a real example, we would have probably connected this to a database. But I hope this is helpful to you, and we'll see you in the next video.